The company was under siege by hackers. I spent 64 straight hours fighting them off and collapsed into a hospital bed. My reward? The director of HR docked my $75,000 bonus, citing an unexcused absence, and sent a company-wide memo about it. Policy is policy, he said. It's not personal. Understood, I replied. From that day on, I became the most policy-compliant employee in the entire company. 01, when the last wave of attack traffic flatlined. It was 4:27 a.m. on a Monday. I uncurled my fingers from the armrests of my chair and gave a slight nod to Kevin, the intern behind me, whose eyes were shot with red. We held the line, I said, my voice a ragged whisper that didn't sound like my own. The company's billion-dollar core IP, 7 years of client data, the financials for our upcoming IPO, all of it was safe. Then the world started to spin, a high-pitched whine, like a server alarm, screaming in my ears. Now, Leo, man! Kevin's frantic shout faded into the distance. My last conscious act was hitting the enter key, a final command that would kick off an automated script, encrypting and backing up the last 64 hours of security logs to 3 separate offline terminals. It was a professional habit. Always leave a paper trail, even if you're dying. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I saw was the sterile white of a hospital ceiling. A cardiac monitor beeped steadily beside me, and 4 lines snaked into the back of my hand. Acute myocarditis brought on by extreme fatigue, the doctor said, his expression grim. You got here just in time. Any later, and you wouldn't have made it. You need absolute rest. I fumbled for my phone. The screen flared to life. Dozens of unread messages flooded in. The engineering Slack channel was a chaotic stream of Leo, you're a legend, and savior of the company. Then I saw it, an automated notification from the company's intranet, flagged with a glaring red, urgent icon. Sender, David Markham, Director of Human Resources. Subject, Memorandum, Disciplinary action regarding unexcused absence of Leo Carter, Engineering Division. I tapped it open. Following a review, it has been determined that Leo Carter failed to report for his scheduled work shift on the morning of the 18th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and did not follow established procedures for requesting leave. This constitutes a serious violation of company attendance policy. The 18th. That was today. It was now 12:40 p.m. I'd been awake for less than 10 minutes. The following actions will be taken. 1. A formal reprimand will be placed in the employee's permanent record, with a copy distributed to all department heads. 2. The employee's quarterly performance bonus and annual loyalty bonus, totaling $75,000, will be forfeited. 3. The employee will be ineligible for all performance awards and promotions for the current fiscal year. 4. The employee's access privileges to core business systems and sensitive data will be suspended for a period of 6 months. The heart monitor beside me shrieked. A nurse rushed in as I was frantically sending screenshots to Markham. The diagnosis, a picture of me in a hospital bed, the server attack logs. My message was short. Hospitalized due to a medical emergency while responding to a critical security incident. Is there a mistake with this memo? Sent. 5 minutes later, his reply came. Leo, I was sorry to hear about your illness. I wish you a speedy recovery. However, company policy is clear. All requests for leave must be submitted and approved through the HR portal at least 4 hours in advance. You did not follow this procedure. Protecting company data is your job. It's what you're paid a salary for. Your unexcused absence is a separate issue, and it is a matter of fact. And the final line, policy is policy. It's not personal. I trust you understand. I stared at the words on the screen. That high-pitched alarm, the one I'd heard during the cyberattack, was back. But this time, it was exploding in my chest. Something I had built my career on, something I had believed in for years, snapped. 02, I was back in the office a week later. My doctor wanted me to stay for another 3 days, but I insisted on being discharged. It wasn't because I was eager to get back to work. It was because I couldn't wait to watch certain people and certain corrosive policies begin their slow march toward oblivion. I must have looked like hell, pale and unsteady on my feet. The 100-yard walk from the parking garage to the elevator felt like a marathon. I had to stop twice to catch my breath. The moment I stepped into the building, the atmosphere felt different. The receptionist's smile froze when she saw me, and she quickly looked down, pretending to be busy. In the elevator, a few colleagues from marketing who had been laughing and joking fell silent. Their eyes darted away, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The door to the engineering department was open. As I walked in, the usual buzz of chatter and keyboards died instantly. Leo's back. Kevin was the first to speak, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. "You feeling better?" "Much better," I said with a thin smile, making my way to my desk. It was clean. Too clean. My favorite mug, the one I got from the DEF CON hacker conference, was gone. In its place sat a brand-new, corporate-branded thermos. Tucked underneath was a sticky note from Old Man Hemlock in the adjacent cubicle. "Hang in there, kid. This place, I swear." I shoved the thermos into a drawer and booted up my computer. My inbox was choked with over 300 unread emails. I searched for Markham and found, in addition to the company-wide reprimand, a series of follow-up emails he'd sent to the entire management team. Strengthening adherence to attendance policies, and the critical importance of procedural compliance. There was also one addressed to me and my boss, Frank Miller. Subject: request for detailed incident report and timeline for recent security breach. The deadline: end of business today. I glanced at the time, 10:40 a.m. This meant that Markham, on my first day back after a life-threatening cardiac event, was demanding a potentially 50-page technical post-mortem report in the next 7 hours. His justification: to facilitate a thorough audit by the parent company and to refine our emergency response protocols. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Just then my desk phone rang. It was Frank. "Leo, can you come to my office for a minute?" The door to Frank's office was closed. When I walked in, he was brewing tea, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were stalling for time. "Sit," he said, not looking at me as he gestured toward the couch. I sat and waited. After pouring me a cup, he finally looked up, wringing his hands. "Leo, about that memo. Markham is digging in his heels. He says corporate is cracking down on discipline and they need to make an example of someone." I said nothing. "I went to bat for you," Frank said, his speech quickening as if reciting a rehearsed script. "I told him you were a hero, that you saved the company." But Markham said, he said merit and misconduct are two different things, apples and oranges. He said if he lets this slide, everyone will start making excuses to miss their clock in, and the whole system will fall apart. "And the 75 grand? Frank lowered his voice. "I talked to Sarah in finance. We might be able to piece it back together for you from different project budgets over the next few months, off the books. As for the memo, it's already out there. Retracting it would look even worse. You just have to tough it out. Once the dust settles, I'll try to get you an Employee of the Year award to make up for it." I listened quietly until he was finished. Then I asked, "Frank, doesn't the employee handbook have a supplementary clause stating that for emergency incidents, any resulting overtime, health issues, or temporary absences can be documented within 24 hours of the event's conclusion, and that with supervisor and HR approval, it's treated as a normal workday?" Frank froze, his eyes darting away. "Well, yes, but Markham's argument is that you collapsed after the work was technically done. He's calling it a post-incident event, so the clause doesn't apply." I collapsed the second the attack ended. I corrected him, my voice calm. "The attack lasted over 60 hours. I voluntarily responded and remained on duty until its resolution. The entire process is documented in system logs, Slack messages, and Kevin's eyewitness testimony. This falls squarely under health deterioration during the course of incident response and is fully covered by the supplementary clause. That's the rational argument." Frank shot back, a hint of desperation in his voice. "But Markham isn't interested in being rational. He's fixated on the fact that you didn't follow procedure. Leo, listen to me. You have to know when to pick your battles. Your talent is undeniable. Everyone knows it. But Markham, he's the CEO's son-in-law. If you go head-to-head with him, you're going to get crushed." I nodded slowly, saying nothing more. Frank sighed and pulled a document from his desk. "This is the template Markham wants you to use for the incident report. Just try to fill it out. Be diplomatic, admit to a procedural oversight, give him an out. Maybe then this can all just blow over." I took the document and glanced at the first section. It was titled, Detailed Explanation for Failure to Adhere to Pre-Approved Leave Protocols and Personal Reflections on the Matter. I stood up and placed the document back on his desk. Frank, I said, my myocarditis hasn't fully healed. The doctor said to avoid stressful situations. I don't think I'm capable of writing a personal reflection right now. Frank stared at me, dumbfounded. I walked to the door and paused with my hand on the knob. Also, per my doctor's orders, I require a 3-month recovery period. During this time, I am prohibited from working late nights or handling high-stress assignments. I will submit the official medical documentation to HR, following all required procedures, of course. As for the incident report Mr. Markham is so eager to see, I pulled the door open, my voice dropping to a near whisper. He can review the system logs himself. Every action I took is recorded. After all, I said, turning back to him one last time, according to company policy, system logs are the only truly reliable source of evidence, aren't they? The door clicked shut behind me. I could hear Frank's heavy sigh echo through the wood. 03 back at my desk, I didn't immediately start working. Instead, I opened the company's internal knowledge base and began downloading files. Not technical manuals, but corporate doctrine, employee handbook, 2025 revision, IT service management and workflow policy, information security protocols and violation penalties, financial reimbursement procedures, addendum to workplace conduct and timeliness, corporate attendance management mandate. And on it went. 17 documents in total, 865 pages of bureaucratic scripture. I spent the rest of the day downloading, organizing, and meticulously tagging every file. From that day forward, I became the company's foremost expert on the rules. My first opportunity to put my new expertise into practice came 3 days later. Don, a manager from marketing, burst into our department, his face flushed with panic. Now, I need help. We're in the middle of our annual pitch to our biggest client, and the presentation server just crashed. The client is sitting in the conference room right now. You got to do something. Everyone turned to look at me. I looked up, adjusted my glasses, clicked through my neatly organized files to find the IT Service Management and Workflow Policy, Chapter 3, Section 5, and only then did I speak. Don, according to official policy, all emergency support requests outside of scheduled maintenance windows require a P1 critical incident ticket to be filed through the IT service portal. That ticket must then be approved by both your department head and the IT service manager. Once the process is complete, the system will automatically assign the ticket to the on-call engineer. Do you have a ticket number for me? Don stared at me as if I'd just started speaking in tongues. Are you kidding me, Leo? Now is not the time for process. The client is waiting. We've been stalled for 10 minutes. It is precisely because the client is present that we must demonstrate our company's commitment to professionalism and procedural integrity. I said, my tone is flat, and even as a customer service recording. These processes are in place to ensure quality of service and to clearly define accountability. Any ad hoc intervention that results in further data loss or system failure would create an untraceable liability. Thank you for your understanding. His face turned a deep shade of crimson. You're deliberately obstructing. I'm going to Frank. Frank is off-site for a conference today, I said, glancing at my calendar. You could try his cell, though the management communications policy suggests email for all non-critical matters. Don stood frozen for a moment, then spun on his heel and stormed out, muttering a stream of curses. I later heard the presentation was a complete disaster. The client, citing concerns about the company's rigid internal processes and poor emergency response capabilities, moved half of their annual contract to a competitor. Frank confronted me the next day, his face a mask of frustration. I didn't offer an explanation. I simply opened my sent mail and showed him the email I'd sent to Don, with a timestamp from 20 minutes before he had even approached my desk, outlining the exact procedure for submitting a P1 ticket. I fulfilled my obligation to inform him of the correct process, I said. Frank, I was just following company policy. If the policy itself is the problem, then the solution is to change the policy, not to punish the person who adheres to it. Correct. Frank opened his mouth, but no words came out. 04 The second test came from Ricky Sun in sales. He sidled up to my desk and whispered conspiratorially, "Leo, my man, quick favor. This client's IP address looks sketchy. I need you to pull the last 3 months of their access records and behavior logs. I think it might be a competitor trying to scope us out." I clicked Open Information Security Protocols, Chapter 4, and the Data Privacy Addendum, Exhibit C, then turned my monitor toward him. "Ricky, according to these regulations, unauthorized access of user behavior logs is a Tier 2 violation. The minimum penalty is a formal written warning and forfeiture of your quarterly bonus. To proceed, you'll first need a compliance review from the legal department. Then you'll need assigned authorization from your division's vice president. Finally, you'll have to submit the request for special approval at the Information Security Committee's next monthly meeting. Do you have the paperwork?" Ricky's jaw dropped. The third time, it was David Markham himself. My phone rang at 11:00 p.m. The caller ID showed Frank's name. When I answered, however, it was Markham's voice on the line, sharp and arrogant against a backdrop of loud music and chatter. He was clearly out at a bar. "Carter, get on your laptop and remote into the servers now. The finance department's month-end reporting system is frozen. The CFO needs those numbers for the board meeting first thing in the morning. My credentials don't give me the right access. Get it done." I glanced at the time on my phone, 11:07 p.m. I reached into my nightstand, pulled out the doctor's note, and began to read from it, my voice calm and measured. "Mr. Markham, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act and Chapter 8 of the company's own employee handbook, I am currently on a medically mandated recovery period, and this is outside of standard working hours. Any request for technical support at this time constitutes an emergency overtime assignment. As per policy, you'll need to submit a special hours work authorization request through the company intranet. The request must specify the nature of the work, the estimated duration, the proposed overtime compensation package, and a signed acknowledgement of the potential health risks involved. Once I receive the fully approved request, I will assess whether my current medical condition allows me to perform the task." The line went silent for a full 30 seconds. Then, through gritted teeth, Markham hissed, "Carter, this is payback." "Mr. Markham," I replied evenly, "I am simply following the policies you yourself signed and distributed. If following the rules is now considered payback, then that is a logic I do not understand." The line went dead. 05 a month passed. I no longer proactively scanned for system vulnerabilities. I stopped optimizing configurations that weren't officially flagged but posed a real risk. I didn't write handy scripts to improve my team's workflow. I didn't jump out of bed at 3 a.m. when a minor server alert pinged my phone. My work became strictly defined by the text in my job description and my annual KPIs. Nothing more, nothing less. I arrived on time and left on time. Not a minute early, not a minute late. The company's cybersecurity infrastructure, once a finely tuned high-performance engine under my constant care, was now running on fumes. On the surface, everything looked fine, but I could hear the engine knocking. I knew the brake pads were worn thin. The hairline fractures I had once patched with dedication and extra hours were starting to reappear. And I was just the driver, following the user manual to the letter. If the manual didn't say to listen for strange noises, why should I? In the second month, David Markham finally erupted during a management meeting. He didn't use my name, but everyone in the room knew exactly who he was talking about. There's a toxic mindset developing in this company. Certain engineers have become obsessed with rigid, bureaucratic processes. They're siloed, they lack a sense of ownership, and they have no concept of the bigger picture. They hide behind the rulebook, and it's crippling our efficiency and killing collaboration. He slammed his hand on the table. You were hired to solve problems, not to create them. If everyone just stays in their own lane, how is this company supposed to grow? This attitude has to stop now. I sat in the back row, dutifully taking notes, recording every word he said. After the meeting, Frank pulled me aside again. This time, his expression was a mixture of exasperation and outright anger. "Leo, do you have to be like this? I've got 3 different departments filing complaints about engineering's response times. Markham is breathing down my neck every single day. Can't you just be a little more flexible?" I gazed out the window at the Seattle skyline. "Frank, I've had an epiphany," I said softly. "I used to think that doing a good job, that protecting the system, was all that mattered. I thought that was how I earned my paycheck. But I was wrong. In this company, the only thing that matters is following the rules. That's how you protect yourself. I turned to look him in the eye, learning the lesson Mr. Markham taught me. Policy is policy. It's not personal. Frank looked into my eyes and seemed to shudder. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the terrifying power that could be unleashed when someone who once carried the weight of the company on his shoulders decides to only be responsible for his own. 06 The breach happened faster than I expected, and with a beautiful, tragic irony. It was a Friday afternoon, exactly 3 months and 7 days after I received that memo in my hospital bed. The weather was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and a palpable pre-weekend lethargy had settled over the office. 2:17 p.m. The first shout came from a sales department. It was followed by another from marketing, then finance, then administration. Like a row of dominoes, gasps and curses spread across the open-plan office. I looked up. Kevin ran toward me, his face ashen, his voice trembling. "Lau, something's happened. Everyone's email." I clicked open my own inbox. Sitting at the top was a new message. The sender was an anonymous string of random characters. There was no subject and no body text. There was only a single attachment. File name, company-wide _salary _details _Q4 2025. XLSX. I downloaded it and opened the file. It was a meticulously organized spreadsheet containing the previous month's compensation data for all 487 employees, from the janitorial staff to the CEO. Base salary, performance bonuses, overtime pay, expense reimbursements, benefits contributions. Even the exact amounts withheld for federal and state taxes. It was all there. The director of finance's quarterly bonus was 3 times that of his peers. David Markham's compensation included 3 separate line items labeled Special Management Stipend, Process Optimization Award, and Risk Mitigation Grant, totaling over $87,000, with no corresponding documentation to justify them. A group of recent MBA graduates were making 20% more in base salary than senior staff who had been with the company for 5 years. The CEO's annual stock option package had a staggering number of zeros after it. The spreadsheet was a weapon, and it had just detonated, exposing every hidden inequity, every secret deal, and every instance of corporate favoritism. The office exploded. Slack channels erupted. Screenshots spread like a virus. People were shouting. Others were laughing with bitter irony. And some were quietly closing their laptops, humiliated by the public exposure of their meager salaries. Who the hell did this? The finance director's roar was audible through 2 layers of glass. David Markham was the first to charge into the engineering department. He was pale, sweating, his normally perfect hair in disarray. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by pure, animal panic. Trailing behind him were the equally terrified finance director and 2 managers from HR. Carter. He practically lunged at my desk, his finger trembling as he pointed at my screen. "Find it. Now. Find out where this email came from, who sent it, and trace every forward. And then you delete every last copy. Go." Everyone in the department stopped what they were doing and watched. I slowly put down the Q3 routine security scan report I had been writing, closed my laptop, and looked up at him, my expression unreadable. "Mr. Markham," I said, "please try to remain calm. According to the Information Security Incident Response Policy, Chapter 1, Section 3, when a major data breach like this occurs, the first step is for the person who discovered the incident, in this case you, to formally submit a P0 critical security incident ticket through the IT service portal, with a copy sent to all members of the Information Security Committee and the CEO's office." Markham's eyes bulged. "Are you out of your mind? Do you know what time it is? This is a 5-alarm fire. I am ordering you to handle this now." I shook my head, my voice still maddeningly calm, as if I were training a new hire. "Mr. Markham, it is precisely because this is a catastrophic breach involving sensitive employee data that we must adhere strictly to protocol. Following the established procedure ensures that all responsive actions are compliant, auditable, and that a clear chain of custody for evidence is maintained. Without it, any subsequent legal action, regulatory investigation, or even criminal reporting would be compromised. I paused, and under Markham's murderous glare, I slowly opened my desk drawer. From a neatly organized stack of files, I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the disciplinary memo he had signed 3 months ago. Using a highlighter, I drew a neat, bright line under the final paragraph. It has been decided to suspend this employee's access privileges to all core business systems and sensitive data for a period of 6 months, effective August 18th, 2025, and concluding February 17th, 2026. I stood up and slid the paper onto the desk in front of him, tapping the highlighted sentence. According to this formal and still active disciplinary action, my voice was clear and carried across the now silent department. I am currently on privilege suspension. Investigating a core data breach of this magnitude requires the highest level of system administrator credentials, including access to database audit logs and mail server backends, all of which, as this document clearly states, have been revoked. I looked at Markham's face, now completely drained of blood, and at the finance director, who looked like he was about to faint, and delivered the final, precise blow. My tone was one of perfect professional regret. I'm very sorry, Mr. Markham. My hands are tied. I suggest you immediately contact a colleague who currently possesses the necessary permissions. The backup administrator, for example. Or you could follow protocol and submit an emergency request for the temporary restoration of my privileges. However, I glanced at the clock on the wall. It is now 2:30 p.m. on a Friday. A temporary privilege restoration requires online approval from the Director of HR, the Director of Engineering, and the Chair of the Information Security Committee, with a notification sent to the CEO. Given standard processing times, I pretended to calculate. The request likely won't be fully processed until Monday morning at the earliest. Of course, I added, if the data continues to spread in the meantime, or if it happens to be intercepted by, say, the media, then our only option will be to initiate the crisis communications plan. Markham staggered back as if I'd physically struck him, bumping into a cubicle wall. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. What could he say? That rules are meant to be broken? He had built his entire case against me on the opposite principle, that this was a special circumstance. He had already established that my life-threatening medical emergency was not. And, of course, there was no other colleague who could fix this. The company's entire security architecture was my design. I knew its deepest secrets, its hidden backdoors, its logging quirks, and the complex web of its permission systems. And the specific vulnerability that led to this leak, a super administrator backdoor in the HR system itself. It was David Markham, the HR director, who had personally instructed me via email to create it, ordering me to bypass all security protocols. His reason: to allow senior leadership to conduct rapid, discrete personnel queries. I still had the email. Leo, at times, senior leadership needs to review employee compensation data for urgent decision-making, and the standard process is too slow. Please create a secondary query interface in the HR system. Access should be restricted to myself, the CFO, and the CEO. This does not need to be included in standard documentation. Treat it as a special case. I had replied with a 3-page risk analysis, detailing 12 potential security flaws and formally advising against it. His response had been simple. Proceed as requested. The risk is manageable. Expedite. Now the risk had arrived, and it was anything but manageable. I looked at him and was suddenly reminded of how I felt in that hospital bed, staring at his callous memo. That cold, surreal, gut punch of feeling. It's your turn now, Mr. Markham. 07 The office was dead silent, the only sounds being Markham's ragged, desperate breathing and the faint murmur of chaos from other departments. I sat back down, opened my laptop, and resumed typing my quarterly security report. Under the heading Known Risk Summary, I wrote, Legacy issues. A non-standard interface exists within the HR system, created in OV. 2024 per Management Directive 4 Special Queries. This interface possesses excessive privileges and lacks sufficient audit logging, posing a persistent data exfiltration risk. A management culture of special case exceptions has led to the creation of undocumented backdoors, circumventing established security protocols. Permission revocation policies for disciplined employees are not being executed in a timely or effective manner. Under recommended actions, I typed, immediate decommissioning of all non-standard interfaces with accountability assigned. Reinforcement of procedural discipline at all levels of management, eliminating special exceptions. A full and transparent investigation into the current data breach, assigning responsibility for both the technical and managerial failures that enabled it. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and stood up, grabbing my backpack. "Mr. Markham," I said quietly as I walked past him, "I still have some sick leave to use up. Doctor's orders. I'm heading home. See you on Monday, if there's still a company to come back to." I didn't look back as I walked out of the department, through the shell-shocked office and into the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing me in silence. In the polished steel, I saw my reflection. I was still pale, but my eyes were bright. Intensely bright. 08, the salary leak, was a depth charge that triggered a corporate tsunami. By that evening, the spreadsheet was on Glassdoor, industry forums, and in the tip boxes of several tech journalists. Pre-IPO tech firm suffers massive internal data breach became the weekend's hottest story. On Monday, the board of directors held an emergency 6-hour meeting. On Tuesday, our lead investor, Vista Equity Partners, sent a formal letter pausing a $50 million funding round, citing gross deficiencies in data security and internal controls. On Wednesday, the SEC's review committee notified us that our IPO filing, scheduled for the following week, was being postponed indefinitely pending a full report on the company's internal control failures. On Thursday, 3 different law firms, representing a class of employees, issued demands for a public explanation and compensation for discriminatory pay practices. On Friday, David Markham was fired. The official reason was gross mismanagement and violation of company protocols, resulting in catastrophic damages. But that was just the beginning. The subsequent investigation revealed that the HR backdoor had been used by Markham over 200 times in the past year to access employee salary information. The audit of the finance department couldn't find any justification for his special management stipends. And it was discovered that a consulting firm owned by Markham had billed the company over $4 million for process optimization services over 2 years without ever delivering a single report. The walls came crumbling down. The company, once a celebrated unicorn valued at $3 billion, collapsed under the combined weight of media scrutiny, regulatory investigations, client defections, and employee revolt. 3 months later, the company officially filed for bankruptcy. By then, I was long gone. I went back on the final day to pack my things. The office was a ghost town. Most of the desks were already empty, and the few remaining employees shuffled about like zombies, waiting to collect their severance checks. I threw the corporate-branded thermos in the trash, taking only my keyboard, my mouse, and my old DEF CON trophy. Walking out of the building for the last time, I glanced back at the gleaming glass tower I once thought I'd spend my career in. It was still there, sparkling in the sun, but it was hollow. At my final checkup, my cardiologist smiled for the first time. "The recovery is remarkable," he said, looking over my test results. "The myocardial damage has almost completely healed. All your vitals are stable. Just remember, no more all-nighters. Manage your stress." I nodded. "I will." "By the way," he asked casually while closing my file, "whatever happened with that company? The one that docked your pay for being in my emergency room?" I smiled. "It went out of business." He blinked, then let out a hearty laugh. "Good." A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. The voice on the other end was calm and direct. "Mr. Carter, my name is Julian Croft. I'm the CTO of Aegis Cybernetics. I was wondering if you might be free to fly out to New York to have a conversation with us." Aegis Cybernetics. They were a titan in the industry, the company my former employer had only dreamed of becoming. "About what?" I asked. "About your future," Croft said, "and about an acquisition we just completed." The meeting was held a week later in a top-floor conference room at Aegis headquarters in Manhattan, with a breathtaking view of the city skyline. On one side of the table sat Aegis's senior leadership, Julian Croft, their chief security officer and the head of M&A. On the other side, there was just me. Croft got straight to the point. "Mr. Carter, we recently acquired the core intellectual property assets of your former company, including the 17 patents related to the Aegis security architecture you designed. He slid a file across the table. We got them for about 30 cents on the dollar. It was a bargain. I scanned the document and said nothing. The reason the price was so low, Croft continued, was because our due diligence uncovered a number of severe administrative vulnerabilities and deliberate backdoors in the system. That hidden HR interface, in particular, it was like a bomb waiting to go off. He looked at me. But when we reviewed the historical documentation and email records, we found that you had vehemently opposed its creation and had logged a complete risk assessment. The person who insisted on its implementation was David Markham. I nodded, which made us curious. The chief security officer chimed in. With your skill set, you could have patched that vulnerability silently before you left. You could have erased every trace. Why didn't you? The room was quiet. I watched the traffic flowing far below for a long moment before I spoke. Because I wanted certain people to understand a principle, I said. In the world of cybersecurity, every backdoor you create, no matter how noble the justification, will eventually become an attack vector for someone else. And in the world of management, every rule you create, no matter how righteous the intention, will eventually be turned against you if it's enforced with arrogance and injustice. David Markham taught me that when a rule is used only to punish those who follow it, it stops being a rule and becomes a weapon. And weapons, I said, turning back to face them, have a tendency to backfire. Croft exchanged a look with the CSO, and then a slow smile spread across his face. Well said. He stood up and retrieved another folder from the credenza behind him, placing it in front of me. It wasn't an acquisition document. It was a job offer. Aegis Cybernetics, Senior Security Architect and Director of Strategic Risk. We reviewed everything, Croft said. Your project history, your technical contributions, and even your work logs from your last 3 months of strict policy adherence. We don't just need another technical expert. We need someone who truly understands the nature of rules and the reality of risk. This position will be responsible for assessing systemic risk across all our major initiatives: technical risk, procedural risk, and human risk. The salary, he paused, is 3 times what you were making before. Stock options are a separate conversation. I looked at the offer, but I didn't reach for it. I have one condition, I said. Name it. On my team, I said, enunciating each word, there will be no special case backdoors. No, leadership overrides that bypass procedure. Every action will be logged. Every permission will be justified. And every violation, regardless of rank or title, will have consequences. Croft's smile widened into a grin. Mr. Carter, he said, that's precisely why we want you. He extended his hand. Welcome to Aegis. I shook it. 2 weeks later, I was on stage at Aegis's largest press conference of the year. The company was formally announcing the acquisition of my old company's assets and the creation of a new strategic risk division. I was the 3rd speaker. The spotlight was hot. I looked out at the sea of faces and delivered my brief, prepared remarks. During the Q&A that followed, a reporter raised her hand. Mr. Carter, it's our understanding that your former company collapsed following a data breach that was traced back to a management-mandated backdoor. As the new director of strategic risk, how can you assure us that Aegis won't suffer the same fate? The room fell silent. I took the microphone and paused for a few seconds before I answered. My assurance is simple, I said. At Aegis, every system, no matter how critical, no matter who uses it, will operate on 3 core principles: least privilege, total auditability, and zero tolerance for violations. If, one day, an executive asks me to create a special case backdoor, my answer will be, certainly. A murmur went through the crowd. I continued, but I will immediately do 3 things. First, I will require a signed, written directive outlining the business justification, a full assumption of risk, and the explicit operational parameters. Second, I will ensure that the design documents, access credentials, and all subsequent activity logs for that backdoor are mirrored in real time to the board's audit committee. And third, I will build in a non-negotiable kill switch. After 30 days, regardless of the circumstances, that backdoor will automatically and permanently close. Because I have learned, I said, looking directly into the cameras, that the most dangerous backdoors aren't in the code. They're in the culture. It's the belief that I'm in charge, so I'm the exception that creates every vulnerability. My job here is to ensure that at Aegis, there are no exceptions, including me. There was a moment of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. 12 after the press conference, I ran into someone in the backstage corridor. David Markham. He looked 10 years older. The suit was still expensive, but the shirt collar was frayed and his eyes were hollow. He was there as a representative of the bankruptcy trustee to sign the final transfer documents. He froze when he saw me. I walked toward him. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I stopped a few feet away, an impassable chasm between us. "Mr. Markham," I said, my voice even. "It's been a while." A dry, rattling sound came from his throat. "You," he finally managed to say, "you knew all along. That backdoor. I warned you," I said, in writing. 3 times. "You did it on purpose." His eyes were red-rimmed. "You let it happen. You wanted the company to burn." I looked at him, and all I felt was a profound sense of pity. "David," I said, using his first name for the first and last time, "you still don't get it. The company didn't fail because of a backdoor I left open. It failed because of you. It failed because you used a rigid, heartless policy to punish someone who had just collapsed saving your assets. It failed because you turned following the rules into a mockery, and then were shocked when no one wanted to play the game anymore. It failed because you broke the trust of every person who actually cared, and then were surprised when all you had left were people who only cared about themselves." I took a step closer, and he flinched. "That backdoor," I said softly, "was a mirror. You used it to look at everyone else's secrets, to feed your own sense of power. But in the end, all it reflected was your own greed, your own arrogance, and your own incompetence. The company didn't crash because of a technical glitch. It crashed because the integrity of its leadership had already been corrupted." The color drained completely from Markham's face. He stood there, trembling, his body slack as if his strings had been cut. I gave him one last look, then turned and walked away. Down the long, empty hallway, my footsteps echoed. When I reached the end, I glanced back. He was still standing in the same spot, a stooped, diminished figure, like a statue, slowly eroding. And for the first time in a long time, there were no alarms. 13 outside, the New York sky was a rare, brilliant blue. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Julian Croft in the Aegis Leadership Slack channel. "Welcome aboard, Leo. First meeting for the Strategic Risk Division is at 2 p.m. Agenda: building an incorruptible system." I typed back, "On my way." Then I put my phone away, pushed open the glass door, and walked toward my new office. Everything was going to be fine.